kept it locked away.
Where'd you get that?
A good question. For another time.
Understanding why certain things are happening in a movie is an essential part of storytelling. Be it told in a visual way or through dialogue is necessary for a good plot. However, the new Star Wars movies are terrible at this. There are several occurrences where major plot details are never explored, or worse, only explained in a novelization, which is fine for stories that are separate from the main plot. But movies should be able to stand on their own. So as any normal person who is confused about the movie, I went online to search for an answer for these very important questions. Unfortunately, the answers were less than satisfying. Like the novelization for The Force Awakens, which delivered a faithful adaptation for the movie. Like when Poe ejected his seat from the TIE fighter before crashing into Jakku, he hitchhiked his way all up to the Resistance base and arrived at Maz Kanata's cantina on time. I'm not pulling your leg here. For those who are new to the media outside of Star Wars movies, there are two categories. Canon, where all the official movies and certain other products are, and Legends, where all the other books, comics, video games, etc. belong. This was a decision made shortly after Disney bought Lucasfilm, which I'm guessing is to give more creative freedom for its creators, so the audience knows what is directly connected to the main movie franchise. But did it work out? Let's find out. In The Force Awakens, right off the bat, we have plenty of questions about the world itself, and as the movie progresses, the questions just pile up even more. That's quite a lot to answer, but maybe some of these questions will be answered.
What are stories but boxes?
Let's talk about Rey Skywalker. Rey from nowhere. Her introduction is okay. We get a good picture of what her daily life is, what she's good at, and we know what she wants. Eventually she needs to go on for an adventure, where she needs to do certain things that she is mysteriously very good at, like fighting with her staff, flying a spaceship, fixing said spaceship on the go several times, shooting, resisting Kylo's mind-reading shenanigans and turn it against him, pick up a lightsaber with the Force and beating Kylo after saying the magic word. Speaking a variety of languages.
No, it's true, we're the only ones on board.
You can understand that thing?
From all these skills, only 3 can be accepted. She lives in a hostile environment, so it's reasonable to assume that she can handle herself with the staff, the item that she carries everywhere. She is shown to be a scavenger, but that alone does not qualify as a good mechanic. She gets a pass for this by mentioning exactly what Simon Pegg modified on the Falcon. And lastly, her piloting skills are known to the audience in a throwaway line.
How did you do that?
I don't know.
No
I've
one
flown some
trained you?
ships, but I've never left the planet.
Did you catch that? Certainly does not compare to how Luke's abilities were established. But this is still on the edge. Maybe she's just really talented. There is a stupid explanation in the novel that she fixed the simulator that she regularly used to practice in her home. Wow, if only we had seen that. And for the rest of her skills, well, that is why I have made this video in the first place. With this current setup, she's ridiculously overpowered. And it could be safely assumed that every scavenger on Jakku is just as talented. On my search to analyze the source of this anomaly, I kept finding articles and forum posts that stated events like Force Download that happened between Kylo and Rey in the novel of The Last Jedi. At first, I thought it's some kind of a joke. It cannot be that a multi-billion-dollar franchise isn't able to make the story's foundation work. But here we are, with a vaguely explained protagonist who is magically good at everything, because the movie didn't bother with it and left it to the book to explain. How is Rey good at the Force? She copied Kylo's training while she was being mind-raped by him. It amplified her connection to the Force and taught her how to do the Jedi moves. To quote the novel itself,
she had seen more, far more. Somehow, almost instinctually, she knew how he accessed some of the powers at his command, even though she didn't understand them. It was as if his training had become hers, unlocking and flinging open door after door in her mind.
This is the biggest piece of fanfiction writing yet. How is the audience supposed to figure this out? And why didn't it work on Poe? It feels like an afterthought. Guess people are only Force sensitive when the plot demands it. But if their intention was to confirm on her Moray Sue status, they have succeeded. How can she know about Darth Vader and his history with Luke, when she thought Luke was only a myth half a day ago?
Luke Skywalker. I thought he was a myth.
Oh yeah, she not only copied Kylo's training, but downloaded his memories as well. Specifically the ones related to Vader. Nothing else.
Yes, the most hated man in the galaxy. But you saw there was conflict inside him. You believe that he wasn't...
And don't tell me she had extra dialogue with Leia or anyone else, because she leaves right after she gets the map to Luke. She doesn't even talk with Poe, even though she's standing 2 meters away from him. Therefore, their first conversation happens at the end of The Last Jedi.
I'm Poe.
Right.
I know.
Such a good chemistry with this trio. Moving on to my next point. How can she speak Wookiee, or like any alien language? She seems to be fluent in almost every language. In Rey's survival guide, it's implied by this line,
I have an old Y-wing computer display I used to study schematics of Rebel and Imperial starships and run flight sims. I practice alien languages and droid speak so I can talk to people in Nema. And I sleep. I made myself a hammock when
I thank the person who answered this exact same question on sci-fi.stack exchange, because there's no way I'm going through that. This incredible skill overload further distances Rey from the audience. The side characters are also becoming increasingly irrelevant due to the main character being so good at everything. Speaking of Poe, you remember the point of the movie when Poe escaped Jakku? Well, Poe did it much faster than Finn, by falling out of a crashing ship into a desert and hitchhiking his way back to the rebels. Him surviving is surely a big surprise nonetheless.
Originally, Poe was going to die early in the film, and he was sick of dying early on.
A week or so later, JJ wrote me and he said, I've got to figure out Poe's in the rest of the movie now. And so this idea that Poe comes back was something that was added later, which obviously for me was incredibly exciting and fantastic. I get to live. Going forward, you know, what they'll add to the fight against the First Order will be really exciting to see where that goes.
But how little is said about this subplot is mind-boggling to me. Did Poe predict that Finn, a guy he just met and deserted from his enemy, is going to assist in getting the plan, map to the Resistance just by telling him about it a few seconds before a missile hits their spaceship? Why even give up on fighting BB-8? We can assume he did, because by the time Leia gets the information about BB-8, he's ready to be sent there with several other fighters to help them. Guess finding Luke isn't too important. It was only in the opening title crawl, and that's just filler. There's also a scene where Rey gets a vision from Anakin's lightsaber, which leads nowhere. How did Maz acquire the saber? Well, some guy in rope skirt and sold it to Maz. Why does a tool hold so much importance to characters that aren't even related to each other? It made a good reference when Obi-Wan gave it to Luke, but it doesn't need to be present forever. Just put it in a damn museum or something. Luke made himself a new one after Empire, so why didn't Rey do the same? Oh. A fun fact, for this flashback scene, Ewan McGregor was contacted 1 week before the movie's release date, specifically for one line in this scene. This kind of writing is so piss poor, but it's still stale compared to that certain sequel. On to The Last Jedi. Technically I have cheated because Rey's power is explained in this movie's novelization, but since the event happened in the previous movie, I put it there. But don't worry, there's more where this came from. The space battle in the beginning is used to frame Poe as a reckless hothead, but even though the filmmakers want me to believe it, they have failed at it. Both the movie and the materials they have released with the movie goes against the argument that Poe's plan was a wasted effort. The movie clearly shows that the cannons of the Supremacy cannot even scratch the main ship of the Resistance, while the Dreadnought's cannon was shown to be a real threat. Also, the novelization confirms that the bombers, along with the other fighters, were deployed during the time the X-Wing was clearing the surface cannons, making the retreat impossible. All of this justifies Poe's actions. Another thing I couldn't wrap my head around was Akbar's role in the movie, obviously for fanservice. He is shown to be sitting on the bridge clearly in a commanding position, but he got only one scene focusing on him. The rest is just him in the back. Well, guess what? The novel gives him some background that he is too old for the job and doesn't want to admit it. However, I didn't get that impression from the movie. He even looks away when all the 3 TIE fighters attack the Raiders from the front. But I guess some artists realized how stupid this is and made a bit more sense out of it. You will be missed, Ocean Man. Reading the novel made me realize how ridiculous the tracking plot is, among other things. In the beginning of the movie, the tracker is enabled from Hux's ship, which follows the Raiders. Now, After Snoke's ship arrives, Rose comes up with the brilliant conclusion that the tracker is probably on the lead ship, which is the Supremacy. What happened with the one that Hux had? Did it run out of batteries? I can well assume it did, since the First Order is very efficient with their military budget. Gotta save up for that new Death Star tech. And since we are on topic, how the hell did they miss the small escape pod?
What is the point of all this?
How did they miss it on the very detailed hologram thing that they are watching on the bridge? This is a problem with how complicated the movie's script turned out to be. It brought way too many additions to the rule set of this universe, digging its own grave on the way. Snoke receives nothing from the novels that is worth mentioning, and we wouldn't be able to guess from the movies alone. Even after knowing his lame backstory, it remains a mystery how he convinced Ben to turn to his side, or does it? Once again, thanks to the other materials claimed to be canon, I can reference them to find out the real cause. So it begins with Han and Leia's divorce. It left Ben conflicted and ignored. Giving Leia the idea to help him by asking Luke to train Ben, it's mirroring Anakin's acceptance to the Jedi Order and the foundation for Luke's claim that the Jedi repeat their mistakes, if it wasn't for the dumbest thing ever. Ben doesn't know who his grandfather was. For some reason, his mom, dad, and even Luke anonymously decide to keep it a secret, even from a 23-year-old.
How did my father die?
When Obi-Wan lied to Luke about his father, I could accept it because Luke was a simple farm boy. His sense of justice or values related to the universe were not challenged, making him see what the Empire stood for and what Vader truly was, saved Luke from recklessly joining his father. But here it doesn't make a bit of sense that Ben, relative to one of the major figures in the galaxy, is kept in the dark about Vader. But it gets better. Eventually Ben learns that Darth Vader was his grandfather, but neither Leia nor Luke make an effort to tell him the full story. You know, about how Anakin defeated the Emperor to save his son, the most important event in this damn movie series. In the movie's commentary track, Ryan states that they were considering showing Ben's training, but instead they filmed only the major turning point.
I also, though, I mean, you know, so I went back and forth, like, do we show a full training montage? Do we show a whole scene where we see kind of his corruption? You know, how much of this do we want to actually watch? And I feel like it would be too much to go back and see all of this. So let's go back to just the moment that really matters specifically to Luke's character, which is the moment of his failure. Because ultimately, he's failed this kid because of his hubris.
But wouldn't that have been a better scene to display the issues with Ben? Instead of wasting time with flashbacks where the same scene is played 3 times with minor variations, you could have shown so much more. What tempted Ben to turn so easily? Why did Luke act out of character to stop him? Why does Disney have to use comic books to explain any of this crap? Whatever. Luke gets mad, then Kylo emerges, end of story.
I fail.
So as I said before, it remains a mystery how Snoke convinced Ben to turn to his side. Knowing more about his relation to Kylo would have been mandatory for the story to make sense. We don't need every excruciating detail about his past, it just needs a clear motivation for why he did it. Because as it is right now, his character is an inferior Emperor clone, which is kinda confirmed. But wasting so much build-up on him for such an unsatisfying conclusion is quite disappointing to say the least. Not to mention that it undermines several plot points. As I said before, Leia was too busy rebuilding the New Republic, but when you look at it, she literally spent 30 years on rebuilding said system when with all her efforts she only managed to bolster this small army? Yeah, JJ's movie destroyed 5 planets, but come on, the New Republic must be way bigger than 5 planets in the same system. And I am to believe that they have stored all their ships in one place? I need to rely on Wikipedia for this info. But according to their article, the Republic issued an act to reduce the size of their army, which I understand, but the news about the First Order got official 5 years before the events of TFA. And on top of that, the Senate has sympathizers with this faction, because you know, the people who conquered several systems and used the superweapon just to keep the other systems in fear are totally reliable to not make the same mistake. My point is that all that effort went nowhere if it only got 400 people on the side of the resistance. Yeah, they called for help in the end, after Leia died. So that is saying something about the leadership itself, which was probably unintentional, but still extremely depressing. Phasma's escape from Starkiller Base. Ever wanted to know how female Boba Fett crawled out from the rubbish? Well, here it is. Through MacGuffins and absolutely brilliant writing, she escaped from the trash compactor, accessed the very same terminal that lowered the planetary shields, and framed someone else for her previous failure. Then went on to hunt said person. So how did Phasma have time for that if The Last Jedi happens right after the previous movie? I frankly don't give a shit. Unfortunately, the disappearing knife gets no explanation. We can never confirm which power Rey used to remove this object out of existence. And this was only the tip of the iceberg that is the Lucasfilm damage control saga. Was it worth it? No. It has been said before, but movies should be able to stand on their own. These kind of information should never be explained outside of the movies. They are too essential, not to mention that this is the laziest way of patching plot holes. As for the book itself, if you like the movie, you will probably enjoy the novel. Otherwise, I cannot recommend it. The new dialogue and extra content makes it very difficult to read for people who don't like Rian Johnson's writing style, because this turns it up all the way to 11. Obviously, I did not touch on the latest movie's novelization, that is because it had not come out yet, as I am recording this video. However, I have seen news that the home release of Rise of Skywalker will not include any deleted scenes, nor a commentary track by J.J. Abrams, which I find quite suspicious. And on top of that, they will release more comics to fill up the gaps of this horrendous movie. Well, good for them. See you next time when I don't need to read a book to understand the Star Wars movie.